All right, guys, WMAP. In a couple seconds, I'm going to be speaking with the gentleman we spoke with the other day who did such a great job, and I'm speaking of none other than Steve Smith. Now, Steve is going to come on, and we're going to talk about his GrowthSource coaching, which he founded. He's the owner of, and just he's got a great story. So I can't do anything before I play a station ID. So let me do that, and then I'll get right back with Steve Smith. He'll be on the phone in a sec, guys. So just hang tight, all right? Be right back in WMAP. Casey Armstrong. This is WMAP, the world's most amazing people.
Host Casey Armstrong has a really good heart, and I think he actually really cares what the people have to say, and I think that the idea has been great, and all these people have the opportunity to really share their stories and get their words out. I love WMAP because I hear stories.
I happen to be of the belief that everyone, doesn't matter what it is, it's how you look at it. This is WMAP, the world's most amazing people. All right, guys, WMAP. Now, listen to this, guys. I help people learn to see things differently. I help them develop business owner mindsets. I get them to be more confident with decision-making, delegating, planning, and taking action. And those are words none other than the great Steve Smith, who founded and who owns GrowthSource Coaching, business and executive coaching. Now, Steve is he's got so much stuff going on with the coaching, and he is an author, and pretty soon he's going to have a podcast with a great title. I love it. It's going to be Business Wingman, I believe is what it is. But, guys, I got so much stuff to tell you, so many things to ask Steve. So with no further ado, guys, it's my honor and privilege to welcome back to WMAP Mr. Steve Smith. Steve, what's going on, buddy?
Casey, it's a great day out here in Southern Cal. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm psyched because I was reading about you, and you have so many really interesting things about you. I mean, how you got to where you are. First of all, why don't we just regroup here and kind of reiterate a little bit about GrowthSource Coaching? Can you tell the listeners, just refresh them on what that is and what you do there?
Sure. I have a business and executive coaching company, and my sole focus is working with individuals. So if you own a business, if you run a business, if you're in an authority level, executive level with a larger company, you've got certain responsibilities and expectations on you that you have to bring to the workplace every single day. Mm-hmm. And for those people who don't feel like what they're doing is getting them the maximum return that they think they should be getting, or somehow they've leaked off the path and they're not where they need to be. They kind of feel like they're in uncharted territory. That's where I step in.
Gotcha. And now I understand when you first started this, you started working mostly with small businesses, but now, of course, as you see your business growing, now you're working with much bigger businesses and larger companies. Is that accurate?
Yes. When I started back in 2008, I was an unknown quantity. Only my friends, family, local relationships kind of knew who I was and what I did, and so that was kind of the realm of where I had to pick from earning clients. But as time went on and as I worked with more people and the word got out and my online visibility started to pick up, I started attracting the attention of much bigger outfits. And those are the folks, I will work with anybody who is really, really dedicated to wanting to make a success out of whatever they've started. But when you work with bigger companies, you get bigger opportunities, and that's where everybody wants to end up at some point.
Mm-hmm. And now, when you first get a client and you reach these people, or people reach you actually, if they go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com, and tell me how the process goes. Say I own a business and I want your expertise, and I want to work with you, and I want to hire you as a coach. Tell me how the process goes.
All right. Well, typically, if you visited my website or you found another place where I'm hanging out on the net, you would fill out a little response box saying, "Hey, I want to consult. I want to spend some time on the phone, so I can get to know you, and you being me can get to know what my situation is." And then we can figure out what the best option is from there. There's times where I get on the phone with people and we have great discussions, and I tell them, look, here's the things you need to be doing right now. Go out and do them. You don't need me yet. You can try this on your own. But most of the time people come to me, they've kind of already gone through that low-hanging fruit, and they're now really stuck in areas where they just have no idea where to go next. And all they're really trying to figure out is, do I have the talent to help them? Am I going to be the kind of person they're going to want to be attached to for the next 6 months, 9 months, or a year?
I think it's, when you look at somebody and you look at what they do, you look at people that are around them. And Steve Smith actually has his family. You have 2 grown children, and didn't your son just start his own business a couple of years ago with you helping him?
He left a rather large, very well recognized company in the industry that he's in. And at one point, after he'd put like 9 or 10 years into it, he just said, you know what, I can do this myself. I can go farther. I can be more successful if I run my own shop. And so he did. And we spent about a year and a half before he even made told the company on building the foundation, getting things put together, getting him to understand fully what he was walking into, so that the day came when he was no longer working for them and he was on his own dime.
Wow.
He wouldn't freak out. He'd say, okay, I've got a plan. I just got to work the plan.
And, just going back just to tell the audience a little bit about you and, what you bring to the table. If people go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com and they want to get your services, is it true that you were one of the youngest district managers at General Mills when you were like 27? Is that true, or is that just urban legend?
Yeah. No, that's true. The General Mills was the first company I went to work for when I finished college. And, I did well, and I was always willing to raise my hand and say, hey, I'll do more if you have it. And at that point in that industry at that time, there was lots of opportunities to get promoted, but you had to move. They wanted you to go to a different market and get more experience. And so at one point I found myself taking on the kind of the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia market, which at that time was about 14 million. And I was 27 years old. I had 8 people, and one guy was 65 years old. He was getting ready to retire, and I was just starting my career.
Wow. And one thing that I think is cool is that everything that you suggest when you are working with a client, you do the same thing yourself, right?
Yes. I'm a big believer in, before you can tell somebody else or guide them in a particular direction you want them to investigate, you have to already have been there. You have to have kind of looked at it and said, okay, how does this work? And what's the best way to get somebody else to not make the mistakes I made? Because if I take somebody through a process and they make all the same mistakes that I made, well, they don't need me. Mm-hmm. They can make mistakes all day long by themselves. My job is to help them avoid the mistakes so they can get there faster than they would on their own.
Mm-hmm. Last time you were on, we talked a little bit about what you called business blind spots. And I was wanting to ask you if you find this a lot now. Do people sometimes contact you when they've let it go too long? I mean, how important is it to get help before it's a complete mess? And how do you know when it's time to get help?
Well, that's like the $1 million question right there, because it's usually the only time it's too late is when your business is like 60 days from bankruptcy, and then very, very few times can anybody ever come in and salvage that. There's just not enough runway space to turn the plane around and get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. Most times before that, though, at any point that somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, I can't get this done. I need help," as long as they're willing to recognize that there's probably going to be some pretty radical change sitting in front of them that they have to put their arms around, and some things they're going to have to actually start doing as opposed to just thinking about them all day. Mm-hmm. If they're at that point where they're ready to take on that challenge, they'll probably be successful turning it around or bumping it up to the next level or getting things out of it that they just never thought was possible. But coaching is an interesting process, because it's all dependent upon how committed the coachee, the person you're working with, how committed they are in wanting to actually do different stuff. Everybody can do the same old stuff day in and day out and not see any different outcome. But it's the people that are really willing to say, okay, I'm done with that. I'm ready to do some different stuff, and even if it's scary looking and I lay awake at night thinking about it, I'm still willing to do it because I believe it's going to get me to where I want to go.
And the same thing, a lot of owners, they tend to live with mediocre results. Now, why is that?
Because over time, as people get to, everybody's got a different, what I call a comfort platform, or a plateau rather. And it's okay. They're there. They may be making money. They're hiring employees. All the basic needs are being met, but they've got issues that they've just never really been able to get rid of, or they've got, they're looking at opportunities in the marketplace that other businesses just like them are getting hold of, and they can't figure out how to do it themselves. And if you sit in that situation long enough, mentally you start developing this thing where you're saying to yourself, okay, I don't really like where I'm at, but I'm comfortable, so I'm just going to stay here.
Right.
And that's what happens. And it's not until some major problem rears its ugly head. And typically what will happen, I get a lot of this, is companies that are family-owned and the husband and wife are involved in the business. And when the business starts really stressing out the family, that's usually when the problem goes from the business to the home environment. And that's where at some point somebody says, okay, we can't live like this anymore. We got to do something or something bad's going to happen.
Right.
And those are the kind of radical situations that cause people to say, okay, I'm done with mediocrity. I'm going to go for it. I need to find somebody to help me.
And that's where you come in. People go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com and you elicit the services of Steve Smith, who has been an expert in this field for the longest time. I mean, I always wanted to ask you, Steve. I mean, we were talking a little bit before. I mean, you were like one out of like 500 people to get a football scholarship. So you always had this work ethic, and something tells me that this was instilled in you by someone. Was your old man, was your father somebody who you looked up to? Was he a mentor? Did he kind of show you the ropes or encourage you a lot?
Actually, that's an interesting story in itself. My dad, he provided for us. He was a Marine man. He had a pretty strict household. I wouldn't necessarily say that he was a mentor, although I would tell you that a lot of his rules and a lot of his edicts about, what you could do and couldn't do kind of shaped how I look at things today, because now I look at something and says, okay, if somebody says I can't do that, that's all the more reason why I'm going to go out and do it.
Okay. I respect that. I think that's great. Now he was kind of a tough guy, and he had rules, so discipline was very important to him.
Discipline, and again, in later years we developed a much healthier relationship, but early on, he really didn't see me as really going as far as I did, which I find interesting because sometimes I sit back and I say, I really shouldn't be here right today. If I had looked at how I started out, then there's no reason why I should be where I am today. But I think the reason I am is because I always figured out a way to get past my own shortcomings. I always found a way to get what I wanted in spite of other people saying, no, you're probably not going to be able to get that.
Well, was that just through hard work? How did you do that?
Most of the time, and early on I kind of figured this out, was if you just spend a little bit of time out in your own environment, the people you hang out with, the situations you get into, and if you just spend a little time looking around and watching what happens, you'd be amazed at how many answers to problems you can figure out just by watching what other people do or don't do. And it served me well pretty much my whole life. And I learned a lot about how to do things or approach things, especially in business environments, just by watching what other people do and the effects, the consequences that come. Sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't. Well, guess what? The lessons you learn through other people's experience that don't turn out well, those are the most valuable lessons you can get, because it tells you what you shouldn't be doing if you're in that same spot.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you seem to pretty much analyze. I guess that's what a coach does, is you kind of analyze everything. And going back to what you do and kind of the meat of it is one thing that I thought was interesting and I find very hard to do sometimes is learning to work more efficiently with employees. Now, is that an important thing? Is that one of the first things you go over when you get a new client?
Typically, if the problems that the client talks about, if I can trace those back to employee performance or workplace relation type problems, then yeah, I will jump right into that, because at the end of the day, for anybody that can build an organization that goes beyond themselves, you have other people now that you have to work with, depend on, make sure that they're doing what you're paying them to do, that they're doing their very best, that they're enjoying what they're doing. Mm-hmm. All of these dynamics play a role in a vibrant, healthy workplace culture. And when those elements aren't there, or they fall away, or something changes along the front, and all of a sudden people say, "Wow, this place used to be a great place to work, but it's not that way anymore." Mm-hmm. Now you got to figure out, okay, what changed? What was there before that's not there today? Because now people aren't showing up every day ready to give you 120% to help you reach the goal you want to reach. They're showing up for a paycheck. Mm. And when that happens, you got major problems, and a lot of times business owners don't see that up front. That's a major blind spot.
Okay.
They think, oh, well, this is all they really can do. This is all I should expect. And so they lowered their own standards to meet what the employees are doing, instead of sitting back and saying, okay, how do I raise the standards and get people back where they need to be?
Hmm. And is it true that negativity with an employee, does that spread quickly? And what should a business owner do when they see signs of that happening with their employees?
Well, yeah, number one, negativity is like a cancer, because even under the best of circumstances, people who are genuinely healthy and well-adjusted will kind of gravitate to other people's woes. We always like to hear other people's complaints, because we can walk away and say, gee, that's not me. I feel good. And so in a workplace environment where you're spending, 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day working with people, somebody that's kind of got a cancerous outlook on things, that stuff spreads. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, because most people in authority positions, not all, but a significant number, are either not prepared or they're just not comfortable dealing with the onset of conflict, mm-hmm. which is what that can end up being if it's left to run its course. Mm-hmm. They just minimize it. They kind of make excuses for why it is, and things will get better on their own. Well, guess what? They don't. Right. So most of the time what I tell people is, okay, figure out where the source of this is coming from. Bring them in your office, shut the door, just sit down and have what I call a Dutch uncle talk. Mm-hmm. This is not me, the boss, talking to you, the employee. This is me, Steve, talking to you, Fred, and just saying, look, Fred, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm seeing stuff out in the workplace that seems like it's coming from you. It doesn't look very good. I mean, tell me what's going on.
Right. So
just try to get them to talk, because most of the time that's where the solution starts.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying it basically is to treat people with respect, even if they are doing some things that are not conducive to the way you want to run your business.
Right, and the reason you do that is because blind spots work in reverse. While you're seeing the ill effects of somebody's poor behavior, somebody's poor choices, they in their own heads may not see any of the effects that they're causing. They might just think, oh, gee, this is a great place to work. I've got real close friends here. I need a little support and a little love, so I'm just going to spread all the crap that's going on in my house, and hopefully they'll understand and support me. And so they're looking at it completely different than you are as the guy that has to oversee the shop or the office, and is saying, wow, this person is just got everybody off track and going crazy.
Yeah, you know what? That's very true. And one thing that I wanted to know, just for the listeners, by the way, guys, if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Steve Smith, and he is the owner and the founder of GrowthSource Coaching. He's a business and executive coach. And if you want more information, go to the site. Go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com. And Steve, I know we talked a little bit last time about one of the hardest things, one of the biggest challenges for you was to develop this credibility and to develop this constance. Is that the hardest thing pretty much for every successful executive like yourself? Is it to find that credibility, to find ways to convey to people that you're this credible person?
Yes, and it all starts with, and I'm sure you've heard of this fellow before. I don't think he's with us anymore, but he wrote a whole bunch of good business books. A guy named Jim Rohn. Mm-hmm. He came up with that know, like, and trust concept. And so if you're going to develop a certain amount of market visibility and credibility, you've got to be known by enough of a circle of people that are either potential clients or people that could lead you to potential clients, for them to get to know you, understand who you are, what you're all about, why you're doing what you're doing, before they're going to feel comfortable that they can say, yeah, this guy's a good guy. He's going to be able to help you. You need to get in touch with him. Sometimes that takes years.
Yeah.
And early on for me, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 times a week. I was out going to networking events, mm-hmm. Talking to a whole bunch of people that I probably initially didn't feel like talking to, eating rotten food, doing all the stuff you need to do to put yourself out there and make enough connections so that people eventually, they meet you this day, they meet you over here, they might see you on LinkedIn, they might visit your website. After they start seeing you show up in 4 or 5 different places, they can now say, oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes a lot of work, and it takes years sometimes to get to that, unless you've got a boatload of money and you just run a bunch of TV commercials and radio spots and you just blow yourself out there in the marketplace in a big way.
Right.
And even if you do that, you got to have something substantial to talk about. Otherwise, people say, well, I see this guy all over the place, but what does he do?
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of buzz going on about business blind spots, and I've heard it's we're looking at November maybe for your book, Business Blind Spots, to come out.
Yeah, I'm planning the people I'm working with now. I've got them on a schedule where I think if we stay with this thing, probably by November I'll have the hard copy edition. Right now, you can actually get an excerpt of it on my website free. It's about a 50-page ebook.
Oh, nice.
I got so much positive feedback from it. I thought, okay, I could probably expand on this, put some more actual case study stories in it and everything like that, and build it into a softback book. And so that's what we're doing.
Great. That's a great idea. And just for my listeners, now you're in huge demand. You're an expert, and this is just taken off big time. Now, do you still have slots left? I mean, can people still get your services? Can they go on GrowthSourceCoaching.com, and can they get an appointment with you, or is there a waiting list?
No, you can. That's the other interesting thing about what I do. Even though I work with clients for an extended period of time, when their program's up, if they opt out because they've came and learned everything they needed to do and now they can fly on their own, they're off and running. So now I've got an open spot. So I perpetually have open spots throughout the year because people come and go at different times.
Right, and I heard that when someone's done with your program or working with you, that you keep in touch with them years after.
Yeah, occasionally I'll get people call me. I just had a client that I stopped working with almost a year ago that sent me an email and said, hey, I got this issue. Can you take a look at this plan I put together and give me some feedback? Absolutely. Because to me, once you're a client, you're always a client. It doesn't mean you're actively involved or, we're working together weekly. But if I've worked with you, I've developed a relationship, and you've come to depend on what I've been able to help you with, I'm going to be there for you as long as you run your business.
Right. Guys, I'm speaking with Steve Smith right now, and he's the owner and founder of GrowthSource Coaching. To get more information, go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com. Now, we're reaching the end of the program here, but don't worry, I got Steve. He's going to be coming back, and we're going to pick his brain, every couple of weeks, so I'm excited that we have him as a member of our family here. But before I let you go this time, Steve, I have to ask you, say the people out there, they own a business or thinking about running a business or opening something, being an entrepreneur, what is something that you could say to make them see that having a coach before you start making mistakes is the way to go? Would you say, like, if someone's just starting, would you go right ahead and get a coach? And my second part of that question is a coach almost like a mentor? Are they kind of the same thing? If you would take those for me, and that would be a good way to end our first interview.
Sure. Actually, the answer to your first question is, if somebody is right at the throes of starting a business, okay, My universal advice to those folks is go out there and do it on your own for about 18 months. Get into it, work with it, do the trial and error, figure out what you're good at, what you have trouble with, because if you use a coach right off the bat and you don't really have much actual experience to talk about, most of the conversations every week with a coach are going to be theoretical. They're going to be academic in nature because you have no practical experience to compare that stuff to. So when I tell people go out and spend about a year and a half working on it on your own, what I'm really saying is come back to me when you know what you can do and you know what you have trouble with. Then we'll have stuff we can work with.
That makes sense. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. What was the other question?
The other question was, when you get a coach, is it the same thing as a mentor? How are they alike? How are they different?
Okay. Here's the basic difference. Both a coach and a mentor really provides you more advice and direction and things to think about, but basically has no responsibility for you doing anything with it.
Got it.
They're always available. You come to them, you say, hey, I got this issue going on. They might give you a parable about what they did at one time or some sage advice. They throw it at you, and then you have to walk out and decide what you're going to do with it, including doing nothing with it.
Right.
A coach, on the other hand, isn't really in the advice business. They're more there to get you to realize what you have to work with and what you have to come to the conclusion of so that you're confident enough to go out and take action on it. And that's what they hold you accountable for. If coaches don't hold you accountable for doing anything, then you don't have a coach.
Right.
You just got somebody you like talking to every week on the phone.
Awesome. Steve Smith, great guest, and thanks so much for spending time with us and, for the help that you give people and the advice and the, taking the experience and the years of what you have under your belt and you helping other people. That's what makes you one of the world's most amazing people and why you're a great fit here. So thank you so much for coming on, Steve, and I can't wait to hear what you got to say next.
Okay, Casey, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Take care. Bye now. Steve Smith, everybody. He is the owner of GrowthSource Coaching. Go to GrowthSourceCoaching.com. Now, that's a great guest right there. I mean, the amount of information that guy conveys is awesome. That's what makes him good, and that's what. Look, if you got a business and you don't call Steve Smith, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So he said he's got spots left. Get on that website, GrowthSourceCoaching.com. This guy has done it. He's up, with the Rocky Romanellas and everybody else who is an expert and who is so successful and now just wants to help other people and give their knowledge to others. So I'm a big fan of his, and I can't wait to have him back. So Steve Smith, thank you very much.